Good afternoon, everyone. Josh is Severe Weather. I'm a meteorologist in the Raleigh, North Carolina area. We are going to talk tropics in this video. It's the beginning of August. We're now getting into a busier part of the year when it comes to the tropics after a lull, and we've got an area that we do have to keep a very close eye on across the Greater Antilles, the Bahamas, Florida, and the Gulf of Mexico for next week. Let's take a look at what's coming to us and the potential for a storm to develop in the eastern Gulf of Mexico near the Florida Keys, near Cuba, maybe near the west coast of Florida. At this point, there's a lot of uncertainty in this, but because of the fact that the system has decided to hold off on developing and actually tracking a little bit farther south, it's going to head into the warmer waters of the Gulf. And so there's at least some potential for this to turn into a tropical storm. Debbie, the next name on the list. And not out of the question, we even look at a hurricane depending on how this ends up tracking. The one thing that I'm most concerned with is that we've got a weaker steering environment next week where this big area of high pressure is going to build south and eastward and going to slow down our storm system and keep it around a lot longer than what was initially thought. A lot of the model guidance a few days ago took this system up near the east coast of Florida, turned it up the coast, and kicked it out as it got picked up by a trough. But because it is forming farther south and west and later, it's missing that connection to be able to escape, and instead is going to be in the area for a lot longer. So what I'm going to talk about in this highly uncertain potential track is what may happen out of this and what is causing things to happen. So this is Invest 97L. We have a 20% chance of development in the next couple of days into a depression, 60% chance, though, as we head into the end of the weekend and next week. And that's really it right now on the Atlantic side. We do have a lot of convection coming off of Africa. You can also see a lot of dry air and dust in place. Let me move this along here. This was this morning's. But now, as of this video, we're almost at lunchtime Eastern time. But most of the activity has actually been in the Eastern Pacific. We have this, what's called a Madden-Julian oscillation, which is transversing the world. It was busy in the Western Pacific last week, now the Eastern Pacific this week, and eventually heading into the Atlantic for next week. So we do now have a tropical storm, which will probably be a hurricane, but heading out to sea here, this is Carlotta, likely the first hurricane of the Eastern Pacific season. Another area southwest of it, which has a decent chance of developing, and then a third area that we need to watch behind it. This is right now the official Hurricane Center forecast. And what I do want to clarify is that this area in orange is where the system may develop. It's not necessarily where it's going to track, but this is the area where it could develop. So a chance this develops near the east coast of Florida, a better chance it develops near Cuba on the south side or even on the north side, or somewhere over the eastern or even central Gulf of Mexico over the next 7 days. So between now and next Thursday morning. Here's a look at the infrared satellite. And I'm going to annotate this for you guys to see. This is Cuba right here. The system is actually centered over the Dominican Republic to the east of Cuba, and the wave axis extends up into the Turks and Caicos and down into the Central Caribbean Sea. Now, this system has a couple of different features with it. There's kind of a southern piece and a northern piece up in here. The two are kind of developing around each other. This is a combination of two waves we were tracking a few days ago, trying to consolidate. But as the center moves over mountainous areas, it may actually begin to consolidate into a more centralized core. Right now, it's very disorganized, sloppy. There's no actual center of circulation, so it won't develop. But the mountains may actually, because of friction, pull them into one closer center. And the question mark on that is that center going to try to form somewhere here north of Cuba, or the mountain's going to tug it farther south to the south of Cuba? And all we're looking at right now is just a guessing game where the models are guessing at where that may happen, but aren't exactly sure. So all the forecasts we're looking at today could still change here in a couple of days, and the skill level is not exactly high in trying to figure out a situation like this. Here's a look at the water vapor image. And you can see a lot of dry air in place with this big zone of high pressure aloft over the south central United States. This is going to weaken some. There's a trough up in here that is going to drive southeastward towards Florida, and that will bring some rough weather into the southeast at the end of this week. It'll also start to entice the system to come a little bit farther north. The problem we're going to see is after that trough leaves to the northeast, this ridge is going to build back in stronger and provide a weaker steering environment for something in here. And what happens there is that when you've got weaker steering, you've got more rain because the system is sticking around a lot longer. It's taking an extended trip. and you also have more uncertainty on where the system is going to go. One thing that is for certain, though, if we do have enough low wind shear, we've got very warm water in the eastern Gulf, especially off of the west coast of Florida. And as the system grows, if it does form a core, which is possible, we don't know yet how that'll play out, then it is in a spot where if it sits around in here, it can develop fairly quickly and maybe outdo what the models are predicting today, because right now the storm has yet to form, but as it moves into this region, it is going to be in a more favorable spot to develop. We've seen a lot of rapid intensification lately with these warmer waters. Again, the models don't know yet what's out there and if it's going to form and where it's going to form, as you can see here on the ensembles. But they do show the majority of the paths bring it into the eastern Gulf. Now, this is a European ensemble. This is a weaker solution. Sunday evening at 7 o'clock Central, 8 o'clock Eastern. But take a look at what happens. We have a system that is going to stick around quite a bit longer, and you do have some stronger solutions here near Florida, near the panhandle of Florida. And we even have some solutions that keep this system in the Gulf of Mexico and actually kind of push it back to the south and west. It's a very complex setup here. This is a look at our forecast tracks, and tough to say when this is going to form, but you will see more of these ensembles showing more strengthening, even near over land for that matter, once wind shear does weaken, which is pretty unusual, but has happened before. Now, the GFS ensemble is starting to come into more agreement with the European, although we have several solutions which try to bring it across Florida and even into the southeastern coastal waters here off of Georgia, North Florida, and the Carolinas. If it gets out in here, I think it's got a better chance of strengthening. If it's over land, obviously it won't strengthen, but if it tries to back into the Gulf of Mexico, it does have that opportunity. Just a big mess, though. You can see if you look out to about 192 hours, we have some solutions that have it near Louisiana and Mississippi. We have some solutions which have it as a remnant low over Georgia, and we even have solutions that are bringing it up near the Outer Banks and away from land. So the spread grows considerably after 72 hours, which would be sometime here on Sunday. Now, I don't want you to take this too much of a grain of salt, but there are a few models that are running and showing this thing strengthening to hurricane force by early next week. This is assuming it goes into the eastern Gulf. There's some continued strengthening showing. So the models that are running so far do show this becoming a hurricane. However, until the storm forms, this is very unreliable data at this point. It could happen, but there's just as much of a chance that it may end up not happening. If you take a look at this messy convection here, you can see there's just no core forming right now. So to even assume this would be a tropical storm in 36 hours would have to assume that this system somehow survives all these mountains, it tightens up and ends up over water here near Cuba. So we're making a lot of assumptions and we're running with those assumptions, but I will say that the ship's model is showing that strengthening. It's showing the loop. It's showing the slowing down of the system. It's not showing rapid intensification as you would imagine. It doesn't have a core yet, but is showing this becoming a Category 1 hurricane in the Southeast Gulf, maybe even getting to Category 2 close to Fort Myers. If you're in Southwest Florida, yeah, you need to pay attention to that. But right now, this is very uncertain. This is not the official forecast, and I don't think we're going to have enough certainty on this until we get to later in the weekend and maybe early next week. So again, just one model. The ensemble forecast mean is extremely uncertain all over the place from Louisiana to North Carolina. The average takes it up towards Panama City and then loops it back into the water. But the confidence on this is extremely low, beginning at 84 hours when it tries to form and then beyond. We can't really trust any one given model. Yeah, the ships has it over here. The mean has it all the way up here. That's a big shift westward away from the peninsula. And there are solutions that even bring it into the central Gulf of Mexico. So just a very, very difficult forecast for the time being. And I'll show you why. As I mentioned, here's a trough moving into the southeastern United States here as we get to the weekend. And then it weakens and lifts out and high pressure builds back in. Our feature is probably going to be somewhere near Florida on the west coast side. As we get into next week, the ridge builds in stronger. And what happens is when you have a system here, there's nothing that will allow it to get pulled northward. You have just such a strong ridge here. When Beryl hit last month, the ridge had a large weakness. There was a big low right in here that pulled it up to the north into Texas and brought the eye wall into Houston. That setup is not here. This thing is going to block our system and keep it around. There's a slight chance it escapes and moves out this way, but there's probably a better chance it's still camping out here in the northeastern Gulf. So that's what I'll be watching for you guys here. If we look at the operational European model, we can see that it's going to struggle to become anything at the core through Saturday, and then maybe low pressure forms on Sunday here as wind shear begins to weaken. The European is not as gung-ho as it was a few days ago on this. It's got a very slow moving and slow evolving system with dry air on the western side. This is still in the Gulf next Saturday, the 10th. So again, there's a lot of uncertainty on that. The AIFS, the AI forecast system, has it over land and then actually evolving into the southeast coast, kind of what the Euro was showing here last week, but it doesn't even get to the Outer Banks until sometime on Friday afternoon or Friday night, maybe as a hurricane at that point. So the Euro operational is a weak system here. The AI forecast is a strengthening storm moving away next weekend, and the control model does not agree with either. It has a weak system beginning to strengthen as it moves towards New Orleans, Biloxi, maybe Mobile, sometime next Sunday into Monday. Just a totally different forecast. We're all over the place here, folks. Here's the GFS model. It does show a little bit stronger trough coming down into the Appalachian region here Saturday night. And so that, as a result, is weakening the ridge to give us a little bit of an opening for a feature to move northward here. As we move this along into next week, you'll see it's kind of hugging the coast of Florida, but again, our ridge of high pressure is building right back in, and we just have very weak steering in place, which means our system is still kind of camping out for some time. If you look at the upper level pattern on the GFS, you can see it's favorable here for development. This is the earlier run of the GFS. I do think this is too strong, by the way, but the steering is so weak that it just sits here and just continues to grow in intensity and size, and we're not really sure where it's going to go on this GFS. This is the 0Z run from earlier. Hurricane that looks like it's going to hit Panama City and then backs out and loops back towards Slidell and Bay St. Louis. And I really don't trust this. This is definitely not an official forecast. This is just one possible solution. The model run after it, completely different, showing a strengthening tropical storm moving into the Big Bend and then moving out over the waters and then becoming a hurricane and trying to hit Jacksonville from the east. Again, it's a wacky solution. Is it going to happen? Probably not. Is it possible? Yeah, absolutely. Everything is possible here. If we look at the 12Z model, you'll see it's kind of an extension of the 6Z where it's got landfall somewhere near Cedar Key and then weakening over Florida and then stalling near the coast of Charleston. And I don't know yet what the GFS will show. We can come back to it, but you can see it is strengthening here off the southeast coast. One thing to be sure of, there will be a lot of rain wherever this ends up going. This is the European AIFS showing over 6 inches of rain for North Florida, moderate amounts for South Florida. The operational, though, because it keeps it offshore, shows the potential for over a foot of rain between now and the 11th of August. The Canadian model is farther west, but has over 10 inches of rain in Leon County, including Tallahassee, and maybe close to a foot in central Georgia, and a lot into North Carolina. And then the GFS from earlier, because it loops that system back, has all the heavy rain across northeast Florida and even around the Big Bend area. So, man, oh man, this is going to be a challenge for us to try to figure out. All I know is that things are going to be changing more here once we wait for the storm to actually form, and that may not be until the end of the weekend. Real quick, let's look at Tropical Storm Carlotta in the Western Pacific. No threat to land, but a developing core, low wind shear, and you can see it will likely be a hurricane as we get to tonight. Maybe a major hurricane by the end of the week, but it will weaken over cooler water as it moves to the west. Here's that intensity forecast. Higher end Category 2 being shown in some models, but most showing a Category 1. This would be the latest a hurricane has formed in the Eastern Pacific in quite some time. So I did promise you I was going to go back here to the GFS real quick just to see what it's doing, and at least it's not hitting Florida, but it's more of a threat for North Carolina here by the middle of next week. Again, do not get too complacent with what the models are showing right now. They're taking an idea and running with it, but until the system forms, until we know how it interacts here with Hispaniola and Cuba and where the center forms, We don't know exactly where it's going to go, only that we do have somewhat of a chance for a hurricane in the Gulf and possibly even on the east coast of Florida or away from the east coast of Florida on the horizon. So, as always, I will keep you all posted once I know more. But I do appreciate your time today. If you did enjoy this video, please consider subscribing, and I will update you as soon as I can. I thank you for your time today, and I do want to give all the credit, all the honor and glory to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, who I put all my trust in, who gives me this gift to be able to use this platform to help other folks and to hopefully encourage you as well. Even if you don't believe what I believe, I just want you to feel encouraged that you're welcome here and that this is a safe space. I want you to be appreciative of what you can and to do all you can in your life. I know there was a time in my life where I was not appreciative until I figured out what was going on, that there was a higher power who created me and who could give me, who could redeem my sins if I accepted Jesus as my Lord and Savior. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, King James Version, trust in the Lord with all thine heart and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. The reason I read that to you is because for the first 30 years of my life, I didn't trust in anything. I tried to trust in my friends, in my employer, in the people around me, but they let me down. One thing I've learned is that the Lord will not let you down. If you try to do it yourself and fight the battles yourself, you will lose. With God on your side, you will win eternally. So you can acknowledge him and he will direct your path. And that is the good news that I wanted to share with you today. I hope you all have a wonderful Thursday. We'll catch you again tomorrow morning. See you then.